it's interesting with humans that when we talk about self-discipline, they think of limitation. They think of self-punishment like punishing who they are and not being able to be free. It's in the word, disciplining of the self. It's not disciplining of you. So most people completely misunderstand the concept of self-discipline. The self is a very subjective construction where you have your thoughts, feelings, emotions, and stories, and all of that operating based on patterns, operating on subjective stories and needs and everything, connected to your survival. And that contains some programs. The reason why it's so important to work on our programmings. Doesn't matter if they're genetic or, based on your own experience. All programmings are based on how to avoid. It's part of the suffering complex, right? This makes me feel bad, so I want to find a way to avoid it. Or I want to justify myself. It's always based on pain. It's always based on suffering. So when we let ourselves be dominated by programs and patterns, we will always operate from suffering and thereby avoidance. We have to become aware. That's the awakening process. It's only in awareness that we can choose based on potential and opportunity, which is what we're here to learn. How are we unfolding ourselves and what we are truly? Our patterns will never do that because that's not their job, is to avoid death, right? It's avoiding anything that can hurt you or harm you, that you find unpleasant, that you find disagreeable. It's all of that. It's all avoidance. So as long as you let yourself be dominated by programs, you will be in suffering. There's no way out because there is no solution to the suffering in your programmings because it's only about avoiding what you don't like. And what the programmings will do to what the ego does, because the ego is the product of the fractalization based on your resistance. So the ego will always come up with strategies to avoid fulfilling your obligations because it represents the resistance. So it's always, look over there, I need this, I want that, to avoid confronting yourself with the resistance. Because remember that your obligations are basically the decisions that you have made with other beings and with life. That you need to do certain things. This is your sheet music. And just like when you look at notes, it's basically movement pattern. What you need to do, what you need to express, what you need to go through in order to fulfill your part. Because everything you do is part of something greater. The ego will always try to make you focus on something else. So that's the thoughts, emotions, stories, needs, and what we want. What can be difficult as a person until we get it is that what we think we want is always irrelevant. So often when we want to, in normal self-growth work, it's the growth of the self, right? So it's all about what I want, what I need. Other people did this to me, so I have to do that. Oh, I really need this to heal, right? All of that. It's irrelevant. What you want is always ego-based. So it's avoidance. It's self-medication. ego is basically just a big construction of self-medication strategies because it's justification. So, as long as we're there, we're kind of trapped. And whenever we go for what we want, what we need, that feels good in the moment. But unless it's part of your obligations, you're tricking yourself. Life only cares about when you move and when you do, when you express according to the fulfillment of your journey. If you're sitting in the orchestra and you play sheet music, all of a sudden, well, I feel like playing that note instead. You're creating noise. It doesn't matter how strongly you feel that note just has to be there. It's ego. It's fluff. It's not understanding the greater context of what's happening. And this is always why the ego keeps trapping us, why we get blind and deaf. Because when you play in the orchestra, and when you have awareness of that, you understand that the great expression of the symphony means that you have to play exactly what's written and exactly the way the conductor has instructed you to do. Nothing else. But you express all of yourself, everything you are through that. In this self, you do not understand the greater context, and then you just, whenever you feel something, it's so important. But it's not in alignment. Disciplining the self. So, does that mean to suppress and to fight with everything in the ego? No. The strange thing is, learn. Self-discipline is not about controlling everything in yourself you don't like, or everything that you find to be disturbing. You don't have to change or control anything. You just have to decide what and who you listen to. And simply because you create a thought, that a pattern is expressing itself, or that you experience something outside of you trying to influence you, does not mean that you have to listen. You are under no obligation to listen. And yet we have a tendency to do exactly that. When we are in the mindset of being controlled by patterns, because then our brain, our mind, our emotional complex are already in the horizontal state, which simply means patterns and resistance. So of course you'll listen to that. But if you can just see and understand that when we think we have to fight with something, that, oh, well, I can only discipline myself by forcing that, whatever it is, to change. When you realize you don't have to do that, just stop listening to it. Make your choices directly from consciousness, from awareness. You don't have to listen to any of that at all. So, how to discipline the self is very simple. Listen to your vertical flow instead. You have the freedom and the ability to choose what you listen to. You are the one making decisions at any given moment. When you don't, your patterns will make the decisions for you, and they will always be suffering-based, which means first you suffer and then you want to compensate and self-medicate. There's no way out. So, try to burst that illusion that self-discipline is attacking yourself, forcing yourself. It's about making decisions from a position of being free, being aware, being in alignment.